Welcome to this week's episode of the Inside Kingston podcast, where experienced professionals, entrepreneurs, and community leaders based in Kingston upon Thames are invited on to share their story with us. I'm your host, Amir Rochalina.
This week's episode of the Inside Kingston podcast is brought to you by Holland Harnham Wills, a financial planning and wealth management firm based in Kingston upon Thames. Holland Harnham Wills specialises in retirement planning for senior professionals and successful business owners. Visit hhw-uk.com to start feeling more relaxed and confident about your financial future.
Thank you for joining us for another episode of the Inside Kingston podcast. I'm joined today by Martin Booth. Martin is the owner of LeBoo Media, a firm offering copywriting services and content management for a diverse range of clients. What's unique about Martin is how he approaches storytelling and content creation, building on his experience as a Fleet Street sports journalist to create meaningful messages that aim to get specific results for his clients' businesses. And be sure to listen to the end, where Martin explains why he describes himself as a lifelong learner, and he delves into the importance of active listening. So whether you're an aspiring wordsmith, interested in the world of copywriting, or would like to know more about running a successful independent business, then I hope you enjoy this episode of the Inside Kingston podcast. Welcome, Martin Booth, to the Inside Kingston podcast. Martin, I'm really excited about this conversation because not only do we share a passion for storytelling, but I also think that you have a lot of experience around copywriting and good content creation, which our listeners can learn a lot from. But to kick off this conversation, I'd like to go back in time, if that's okay. So where did you grow up?
Thanks, Amir, and it's really good to be here. I grew up in Fulham. I was born in Fulham, lived there for 25 years. Then when I got my own place in my mid-20s, I moved to Putney, spent 10 years there. I've been in Kingston for about 17 years. I've always said I want to live by the coast, and by the time I'm about 250, I might just about have made it.
Small steps. Martin, what did you study at college or university?
I was always good at English. I was always good with words. So, and also from my mid-teens onwards, I knew I wanted to be a sports journalist. So I kind of geared my A-level choices around that and my degree choice around that. I've got a degree in English language and literature because, like I say, in my mid-teens, I realised two things. Number one, I was good with words. And number two, I absolutely loved sport. So I put the two together and thought, why not become a sports journalist? And everything from that moment on was geared towards that aim.
So I'm going to have to put you on the spot. Who do you support?
I'm a Chelsea fan. I'm a Chelsea season ticket holder. I'm now in my 50th season of going to Stamford Bridge.
So not one of the glory chaser Chelsea fans. No offence to anybody.
Oh, I don't know. I started watching in 1970 just after we won the FA Cup for the first time, but I was only 6.
Fantastic. Good stuff. Martin, I'm curious about your days in sports journalism because, of course, there are mixed views about journalism as a whole nowadays, but it seems to me that sports journalism more than ever, it needs to prioritise stories and prioritise how it tells stories to get people to either click on the link or read the story. Could you tell us a little bit about your days in sports journalism and then a little bit perhaps about your opinion on sports journalism as it is today?
We've got a couple of hours because we can go all day on this. Like I say, I always wanted, the only thing I wanted to do, the only life I wanted to lead was as a sports journalist on a national newspaper. When I was 26, I got there, and I spent the next 21 years doing exactly that.
Wow.
And I loved it for the very simple reasons you've identified. It's sport, it was a way of being close to sport, and it was a way of being part of the process of bringing sport and the stories surrounding it to the tens of millions of people in this country for whom sport is important. Yeah. And if we could go down a lovely little sidetrack about why sport is great, why sport is fantastic. Simple observation, if you imagine the landscape of London without Wembley Stadium, Lord's Cricket Ground, all the football stadiums, the All England Club, it would be a very different place, it would be a very different life. Obviously we've strayed completely off the path. I loved it. In those days you were still in the era when people would pick up the paper in the morning and find out what happened in the football last night. Now, again, another avenue we could explore is the way journalism in general, and sports journalism in particular, has changed in the last 25, 30 years with the advent of the digital age, because I don't know the last time I picked up a paper in the morning and thought, I wonder what happened last night, because I know within 10 minutes of the final whistle who scored, how the goal was set up, what it means for the rest of the season, and that goes for all live sport. You think of the way we digest cricket these days, and there's a ball by ball on your phone, on an app, on Twitter. You can always stay in touch. So for me, the key to quality sports journalism is interpretation. I always used to say to people when I sent them out to cover matches, don't tell me how, tell me why. Because, like I say, within minutes of the final whistle, I know how. I know that Smith crossed and Brown scored in the 57th minute. I want to know why. Use your insight and experience and judgment to give us something, an interpretation of the game that's not available just simply from the scoreline. And that's where I still think that there is quality sports journalism out there. And there are certain places where you can go to see that extra dimension, that understanding, that analysis, if you like, more than just statistical analysis, but ways of really bringing out an understanding of the game. I watch sports and football on TV, and there are certain pundits who can tell you something about a game you've watched, a game you've been at, and you think, I didn't see that, or I didn't realise that. And that, to me, is the value of really good sports journalism and sports analysis, because right now, going back to the original question, it's all about data and information, and that happens instantly.
Yeah, absolutely.
The extra dimension you can give if you've got people on your staff who can interpret, who've got the experience, the wisdom, the knowledge to say, and did you realise this means X? And did you spot that this happened? And that's why Fulham scored 3 second-half goals, or that's why Manchester United lost the lead in the second half. And that extra level of understanding is where sports journalism can still add value, can still add meaning.
Absolutely. Martin, there's so much I want to unpack in what you've said there, but I really found your observation around the importance of sport pretty interesting, because I've been a beneficiary of that myself. I mean, it's pretty universal. And given that I'm originally from Brazil, I've lived in Australia and America and settled in the UK, sport has always been a common denominator to make friends, get in with a group of people, start social activities in different neighborhoods. So I really like the way that even as a sports journalist, you were very much aware of the impact of sport in society as a whole.
Sport is about bringing people together. Sport should always be a force for good. And nothing is more tragic than when sport is used as an instrument to divide people. You can think of some of the tribalism driven by social media around football these days, for instance. It's gone way too far. Of course, if we support different teams, we can have a rivalry, but the fact that we are both football fans should enable us to have far more in common than that which divides us. And the idea that, oh no, I can't have any friends who are Tottenham fans or Fulham fans because I'm a Chelsea fan, well, that's completely illogical. It's seen to the most effect, I suppose, in football, because football is such a game that arouses such strong passions in people. But, we're playing against Australia in cricket at the moment, and I love the Australian attitude to sport, which is play it as hard as you can, absolutely be the steeliest competitor possible, but at the end of it, you've gained something, you've learned something, you've moved on.
Yeah.
And that's how sport should be played. It should be played hard, it should be played fair, but at the end of it, you've made a friend rather than made an enemy. And that, for me, is why sport is important. It should be a great driver for good in society.
Absolutely. So, Martin, from a career in sports journalism to then setting up your own business, could you tell us a little bit about LeBoo Media today?
LeBoo Media was set up in 2014. I left newspapers in 2011. I was there on the News of the World. I was digital head of sport when the sky fell in and the title was closed. And again, we could talk all day about that.
I bet.
But I moved on from there to the betting industry. I spent time in B2C role, a B2B role as well. And, excuse me, a long contract came to an end, and I knew that it had to be words. That words have been always what have driven and excited and interested me, and also, frankly, I know I'm good at them. So I'd started picking up. I set up the consultancy, like I say, in 2014, but I'd started picking up some copywriting customers along the way, and I thought this is what I should be doing. So April 2017. Basically walked out into a barren landscape and immediately started just networking in the Kingston area and beyond, just introducing myself to people and seeing what kind of appetite there was for someone who could write good copy, get people's message across in the best way possible. And pretty quickly first of all through the Kingston Chamber of Commerce, started to meet people who were interested in what I had to offer. And it's pretty much gone from there over the last 2 years.
And just out of curiosity, where does the name LeBoo come from?
Well, I can exclusively reveal that it was nothing to do with me. I wanted something really dry and drab as the name. And my wife pointed out that we've got a daughter called Lily. We've got a daughter called Eleanor. Her surname is Booth. Put L-E, Boo together. And you end up with LeBoo Media. And the nice thing is that some people around Kingston and other places I network now call me Martin LeBoo.
Oh,
Because
fantastic.
they think that's, and in some ways I don't want to correct them because clearly it's good for the brand.
Yeah.
It's all about recognition and getting your name out there. But no, there's nothing French or flash or posh about it. It's just a running together of names.
I think that's brilliant. Martin, just before I dive into your expertise as a copywriter and a content creator, I just wanted to unpack a little bit about your initial efforts in networking within an area. So you and I have that in common, where we both started networking to make business connections in an area where previously we didn't know anyone. How did you feel about those initial stages of networking within the Kingston Chambers of Commerce and other events?
Well, I was lucky because I've never had a problem walking into a room of strangers and bowling up to someone and starting to talk to them. I'd spent the previous years I worked for 12 years in Canary Wharf. I'd worked in Wapping, I'd worked in Harrow, I'd worked in central London, but I'd never actually worked in my local area. And I bumped into an old friend of mine, good friend called Harry Gibson, who runs a business down in the south of Kingston. And he'd just joined the Kingston Chamber, and he said, give it a go. It's a great place for meeting other business owners in the area. And I was lucky that I walked into the first event. The first person I spoke to was absolutely brilliant. He introduced me to someone else, and within 10 minutes, it's like I had 4 or 5 new friends. And it went from there. And I've always, like I say, been happy to, summon up the gumption and walk into a strange room and start talking. And really, I think I joined within a few weeks of that initial meeting. And it's gone from there, really.
That's brilliant. So, LeBoo Media, tell us a little bit more about your business and the sort of work you do for your clients.
We work with a vast array of clients across an equally vast array of industries. People keep saying to me that you need to find a niche, you need to specialise. But at the same time, I keep being asked by different people from, like I say, various different backgrounds to do different things. So it can be online materials, so the words for your websites, blogs, white papers, awards submissions, as well as offline materials such as brochures and mini books and, again, annual reports, pretty much anything. So, and what I found is that when people come and ask me, can you do this? And I go, yes, of course. And then I turn it around and they're happy. Well, that means I can move into that particular area of expertise. So I'll give you, for instance, just one day this week, I had lunch up in the city with a regular client who's a high-end recruiter, and I was digesting his latest thoughts about, he does a quarterly update notes from a headhunter's desk. We then had a lunch with a very prominent CEO in the city to download a sort of Q&A interview with him on the subject of leadership. On the way home at Waterloo Station, I phoned the boss of a fertility consultancy whose website I'm writing at the moment. And then in the evening, I wrote a 700-word blog about the controversy surrounding the latest Grand Theft Auto 5 online release, which has a live casino element. Now, you add all those different things together, it's not me just trying to say, look, what a smart so-and-so I am. It's an indication that people come to me with all kinds of different subjects, all kinds of different backgrounds, including healthcare, finance, tech. And even when people say to me, what would you like to write about? Well, I want to work with good people who know they've got a message and they want to get it across, and trust me and know that I will get that message across for them in the most compelling, eloquent, articulate way possible, so that they're really talking to their marketplace.
When you describe the way you deal with a diverse range of writing, as you've just described there, Martin, it actually makes sense to me, because your company's headline is getting the message across. And it seems to me that the key ingredient that links all of those different topics that you work on is the fact that you need to be a good listener, so that you can actually capture the information you need from your client to create the right message for them. So is this a skill you picked up back in your journalism days?
Yes, it is. I mean, it's in fact, if you listen to the best TV interviewers, and more pertinently the worst TV interviewers, I always go back to the fact that when we were actually taught interviewing techniques, I trained as a journalist. I've got a qualification in newspaper journalism. And when we were doing our classes on interview techniques, the one word they hammered into us was listen. Listen to what you're being told, because it will inform the next question. And then, of course, the first time you go into interview a local personality when you're on your local paper and you've got a list of 10 questions and you ask a question and they answer it and you ask a follow-up and suddenly they're answering question 9. You think, oh no, I've gone out of order. And then you think, hang on a second, we'll come back to it. Let the conversation flow. And it's a far more easy to engage experience for the person doing the interview, because they think, actually, you're listening to me, you're responding to me, you're placing some importance on what I'm saying. Now, to answer your original question, fast forward to when I sit down with someone, I always say the first thing I need to do with any prospective new client, give me half an hour of your time. And whatever your background and specialism, there's 2 questions I want to ask. The first one is, who is it you want to talk to? Because that informs the tone of voice, it informs the language you're going to use on the website, in the blog, whatever it is, whatever piece it is you're writing. And then the final question is always, why you? There's always a reason why you, as the client, differentiate your service from the people around you. And quite often that's the answer that gives you the headline right at the top of the page. It's because we do something in a different way. It could be the focus on customer service. It could be because you're a family firm. It could be because you've been in an area for 35 years and know everybody. But there's always something. And yeah, you're absolutely spot on to highlight that as, for me, the most important thing, being able to listen and digest the information, then turn it around in a form that the client's going to say, hey, that's just what I wanted to say.
Well, it's pretty clear to me, Martin, that you have a lot of expertise in the written word. But actually, through LinkedIn, funny enough, I understand that you're now a student of public speaking too. So could you tell us a little bit about your recent experience at the Professional Speakers Association?
I'd be delighted, Amir. This is something that came out of... I sat down at the start of this year and actually did a business plan and wrote it down. One of my stated aims for 2019 was I kept being told, whenever I stood up and did my 60 seconds out networking or 10-minute presentations or pitches, whatever, people said, you're quite good at that. And instinctively, I'm very shy. So it takes a lot for me to, like I said earlier, about walking into rooms full of strange people. But I do it because I'm used to it, not because I think, oh, great, a chance to be extrovert and take the spotlight on the stage. But I looked at this and thought, well, let's have a go at public speaking. And a good friend of mine in the Kingston Chamber is a member of the PSA, and she said, come along to some of the meetings. And you just learn so much from listening to really good speakers. Simultaneously, I was inspired because I could see that there was a pathway to become a better public speaker and maybe even think of it as an additional income stream for LeBoo Media. But simultaneously, it was very daunting when you see people who are really, really good at this, the absolute top of the profession. You think, well, that's how far I've got to go. It's a bit like standing at the bottom of Everest. You can see the path up, but it's awfully steep. So, yeah, one of the things, I joined the PSA. And one of the first things they said was, as an associate member, you can take part in our annual speaking competition for emerging speakers, which I did, and I won the London Heat back in July. And I'm on my way to the national finals to compete for the national title. It's something I found now that I really, really do enjoy, standing up in front of an audience and speaking. And I've listened to, like I say, some very good speakers and picked up some tips about how to keep an audience engaged, the way you should speak, the pace you should speak, how you should use your body, and just the stagecraft of it all, as well as the words. Because I backed myself, obviously, to write a decent speech and to write some decent words. But how you get that across and how you reach out to the audience and engage with them, that's something, obviously, I'm still learning. I'm still very junior when it comes to that. But it's something I'm enjoying. Like I say, it's something to my surprise, it's going even better than I thought when I put it as one of my stated business aims at the start of this year. But I do hope it's something that leads to more engagement, more visibility, more work for LeBoo Media.
Absolutely. And again, there's a common thread there between content creation with written words and also the spoken word, which is this business of storytelling. And I want to sort of take a left turn on this, if I may, because I've noticed that businesses are realizing a lot more that we as in the consumer, react and connect a lot better to a story than we do to a product. With this in mind, what are the sort of upcoming trends that you're seeing when it comes to copywriting and content creating for your customers?
Well, you say we as consumers, I'd say we as a human race. If you bumped into one of your friends tonight that you haven't seen for 5 weeks, 10 years, and you went down the pub for a chat, the first thing you do is tell stories to each other.
True.
Did you go on holiday this summer? Yeah, let me tell you about it. Where are you living these days? Well, there's a funny story around that. That we communicate with each other in the form of stories. We don't communicate in the form of bullet points or let me get straight to the point of this, let me try to sell you something. It's a much more easy and very instinctive and primeval way that we as humans communicate with each other. So I'm always saying to clients about the importance of case studies and testimonials. So if I go on your website, I'm looking for the experience of someone like me who's come to you with a similar kind of background or pain point or problem, and you've helped them out. Because that persuades me, gives me real confidence that you're someone I can deal with, someone I'm going to get treated well by. It's why we go on review sites and we read Google reviews and whatever else about places and products and destinations, because we want to read stories about them.
True.
I'm very aware that people these days interact with an online portal through their phone. So everything's got to be mobile friendly, which in some ways talks to my old background in tabloid newspapers to make the message as economical and streamlined as possible. But also one way in which more and more people are going to find what they need online is through the forms of question, through voice. It's going to be about voice search. Now, if you're doing voice search and if you pick up your phone, it'll tend to be in the form of a question. So more and more I'm saying to clients, and clients seem to respond quite well to this, you need an FAQ page. So anticipate the sort of questions people ask. Why do I need this? How can I find it? How will you help me with this? And then provide the answers, because it will help you with your search capability and get you found more often, as well as when people get there, give them that confidence that you have the answer to their question.
In your experience, Martin, what's the other side of that coin? What are some of the common mistakes that you see on company websites?
The main one that I see, and it still surprises me when I see it, that people have spent thousands and thousands of pounds on designing a beautiful, brilliant website with great functionality. It looks terrific. The branding is absolutely on point. And then the copy speaks all about we and us and our. And you think, hang on, you've got to establish an emotional connection. You've got to make it clear to me, the visitor, that you understand why I've clicked on your website. And I've written blogs about this, I've done talks about this. The first word on your website should be you. So you are here because you have a particular issue. Point you paragraph. We are here to solve that issue. That's when you roll out your credentials and say, we are placed, we have the experience, the know-how, the knowledge, we are going to help you to ease that pain. We're going to make your life better for having us in it. But you've got to have that initial connection. And it does always surprise me. And second, I've got to tag on to that. It surprises me when people spend, like I say, tens of thousands on a beautiful website, the branding looks perfect, and yet there's spelling mistakes and grammatical errors all the way through, because, and I know I'm not alone in saying this, because you kind of, wouldn't I? I think it's important that spelling and grammar are absolutely right. But it is still surprising how many times you go on websites and you think, it just didn't read that through, did you?
That's not great. It's not great for the message that the company is telling the world when it's not them telling it to the world. Because that is what a website or a piece of content, a blog or a book is, right? It's the calling card when you're physically not there.
Yeah, it's the way you are talking directly to your customer. You've got, I don't know how many seconds it is, because that will vary according to the time of day and who you ask, but it's not very many. It's 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 seconds. And if in that first 7 seconds you've got something spelled wrong, the name of the company or the first sentence, going back to newspapers, I always said if you were writing or subbing a sentence and you got halfway through and had to go back and start again, rewrite it. Because if you've reading copy should be a really easy experience. The information should flow off the page or off on the screen straight into someone's mind through their eyes. And if they've got to stop and go back, then it's not working. Go back and try again.
Would that be a tip that you would give to our listeners who, perhaps because of where they are with their business at the moment, are writing their own copy or creating their own content? Maybe read it out loud and see how that sounds back to them?
I can't believe you said that. That's my big tip. The big tip is definitely read it out loud. It sounds a bit weird and you might feel a bit strange standing in your office or in your bedroom reading it out. But you can hear, when you read it out, and like I say, it flows off the page and it flows through the air and it almost sounds like music. When copy is done right, it sounds like music. And you'll be able to hear it. Instinctively, you will know what sounds right. And if it doesn't, go back and revise it.
Fantastic. Martin, I think you have a great profile on social media, and we could talk about the different social media channels that you're active in, but in particular, I'm connected to you through LinkedIn. Could you tell me or tell us a little bit about how you use social media to grow your business?
Well, like you, I'm a massive fan of LinkedIn. I'm on, as you say, many social channels. I've got a company page on Facebook, I've got a company Twitter feed, I've got a company Instagram, and to be honest, I very rarely engage through that. For me, it's all about LinkedIn. Mm-hmm. LinkedIn, someone was described as Facebook for grown-ups. I think if anyone goes on there and starts posting cat videos, they get scurried out the door fairly quickly. I use it to try to position myself as someone who can help potential customers, but also to try to position myself as a thought leader, a subject matter expert. So I will talk about some of the things we've been talking about. The importance of getting the tone on your website right, the importance of spelling and grammar, the importance of addressing your customer first off. Those are all things I've talked about on LinkedIn. And it's not just an outgoing experience on LinkedIn. You'll learn stuff. From people you're connected to, but also people you're not connected to. And good copy, good content from people who've got a story to tell, because I'm not so naive or arrogant as to think I'm the only person with a good story to tell and a way of telling it. There's other people out there who will come up with good copy, good video, and you listen to that and think, actually, I learned something there.
Good content travels, right?
Yeah, I'd like to think so.
Martin, given your background from sort of the corporate world of journalism in big publications down to having your own business, local business here in Kingston, what are some of the key business lessons that you have learned throughout your life?
Goodness gracious me. Really good question. I would say one of the lessons that comes across to me is treat people the way you want to be treated. And it does come back to you. I remember speaking to a business pal of mine a couple of years ago, and we said about some of the experiences we've had at some, shall we say, less scrupulous operators. And I've always said, no, I'd much rather be honest and upfront, and the other word is authentic, because I think people know when you're not being yourself. And in some ways it's not a business lesson, it's just a life lesson. But treat people the way you want to be treated. I don't believe in karma. I don't believe that the universe sees everything and the universe will give you what you want. I don't believe that things balance out in the end. But I do believe that you've got to treat people the right way. And then also it makes it easier to spot the people who aren't treating you the right way. And one of my business aims ultimately is to be able to pick and choose the clients I work with. And one of the reasons, apart from, yes, they're great people to do copy for, or yes, I like the subject matter, I want to work for people I like working with.
Makes a lot of sense to me. When you look back at your career journey to date, what are you most proud of?
I would have to say there's two things. I'm very proud that in my mid-teens I identified what I wanted to be and what I wanted to do. And it took me 10 years to get there. A lot of the time people say, everyone wants to be a sports journalist. It's so hard, it's so competitive. But I stuck at it and I got to do it. And I got to live my dream for more than 2 decades. And, I'm going to indulge myself because you asked the question and say, yeah, I'm really proud of that. But at the same time, I'm also proud that when I moved away from that path for reasons far too intricate to go into here, I'm proud of what I've done with LeBoo Media in the last couple of years. I'm proud that I go into events in Kingston and people know, and I'd like to think, respect what I've done and what I've done for clients in the area, and much further afield. And the sense that I'm building something completely unexpected, because if you had said to me 10 years ago, what are you going to do with the rest of your life? Well, it would be the same as I've done for the previous 20 years. If you'd said you're going to be running your own business, by, here we are, late in 2019, your business would have been going for nearly 5 years, and, we haven't had to sell the house, and the kids aren't living in a cardboard box. One of my favourite phrases is, you only know how strong you are when being strong is the only option. And anyone who's launched a small business knows how incredibly tough it is, how challenging it is, how the long dark nights of the soul, the worrying whether you're doing the right thing. At the same time, everyone knows the absolute elation of doing a good job for someone, a feeling that things are growing and moving in the right direction. But it is tough, it is challenging, but the fact that we're still here and things are definitely moving in the right direction for LeBoo Media, yeah, to answer your original question, I'm very proud of that.
That's fantastic, Martin. I think what you said there also speaks directly to the next question I wanted to ask you, which is, what advice would you give to students, or perhaps even people who are just coming out of university or college and thinking about a career in either journalism or in copywriting, content creation? You've mentioned something there which I think struck a chord with me, which is stay the course. You know, the beginning of any profession is going to be hard, but any other tips or career advice you'd give for people planning on working with the written or the spoken word?
I think that's two questions. One is, in terms of journalism, as a very famous old sports editor said to me once, he said, there is no higher calling. If you want to be a journalist, then yes, of course you're going to have to show some tenacity. Yes, of course you need to be fairly proficient with the written word. You don't need to be a grammar Nazi. I've worked with some absolutely terrible writers who are great journalists. But yes, you've got to have a certain attitude, a certain determination. What I will say is that when I moved into journalism, for me, the only place to aim for was Fleet Street. National newspapers, it was the promised land, and that is now no longer there. There are so many other ways in which we absorb news, features, sport information that have nothing to do with national newspapers. The landscape has changed completely. It's a very different world to what it was. There is still a great time and great careers to be had in journalism, but like I say, the end game for many people will have changed. And a lot of it is about attitude. So much of it is about attitude, just saying, well, I'm going to have knocks, I'm going to have bad days, I'm going to have setbacks. But if that's what I feel truly that I was born to do and born to be, then I will stick with it and I'll get there. And I think the other thing is always be learning. And this kind of moves me to answer the second part of the question about copywriting, because a lot of the lessons are the same. But always be learning. You've asked earlier about the things we're looking at in terms of search, in terms of voice, in terms of FAQs. Always be open to lessons about the different ways in which you are going to conduct yourself as a business person, but also the different ways in which that business is going to operate. So we've spoken about me doing more public speaking this year, but also in the last 12 months I've done new things. I've started writing speeches. I wrote a mini book for a company in London. I'm currently in discussions with someone who wants me to write a full, proper book with him. These are all things I wasn't doing 12 months ago. So always have that openness and willingness to try new things, because this may be a bit of a cliche, but I've got it written on my wall at home. Nothing great ever came from a comfort zone. And you've always got to be pushing the boundaries and bringing new territories within that comfort zone. And at some part of it, that's going to be tricky, it's going to be testing.
Yeah, that's great, Martin. I think we're kindred spirits. I think lifelong learning is a passion of mine, and it's only done me favours in life. So I'm with you 100% there. Martin, what next for you and your business? Are there any projects in the pipeline that you can tell us about?
I've got loads of projects in the pipeline. As I sit here now, and I'm touching wood when I say it, but I'm basically back-to-back busy for the next 5 weeks, and I'm already looking at things a couple of months down the line to bring on board. I want to get bigger brands on board. There are certain people I'm working for who, you would recognise the names, but I don't want to say it yet, just not to hex it, because I haven't been through the door yet. I want, like I say, bigger brands. I want more and more marketing and web design agencies. That's someone I'm particularly keen to work for, because these are people who have a need for a regular supply of content. At the same time, I'm happy to work with SMEs, with brands, both in Kingston, New Malden, Richmond, other areas beyond. Anyone who wants their message got across in the best way possible. But in terms of the specific target for, let's say, the next 12 months, I'd like to think that this experience I've got at the moment of being booked up for the next 5 or 6 weeks replicates itself. So at some point, I want to have the decision about whether I expand and start subcontracting and taking on employees, or staying as a one-man band but just being a bit more picky and choosy about clients. I think I know what will happen, because if I was 26 or 36, then I'd be saying, yes, let's take over the world, let's have the LeBoo Media empire, but next year I'm going to be 56. So I think that I don't have the, I was going to say I don't have the energy, but the other day I started at 5:30 in the morning and I finished at 10 o'clock at night, and that's not untypical. But just the idea of taking on that whole extra dimension of running a business and expanding it and taking on staff with all the implications that has, I've got, like I say, lots of very clear ideas where LeBoo Media is going to be. It's more of the same. It's still delivering, I hope, great service that people are really happy with, that leads them to say, I'm glad I work with him, and I'll happily recommend him elsewhere. But like I say, bigger brands, bigger operations, places with a little bit more, security from my point of view, that I'm going to be working for people for days, weeks, months at a time, rather than going from pillar to post from morning to afternoon, day to day.
Yeah.
I hope that made sense, because it felt like that got a bit rambly.
No, it makes a lot of sense to me, and it seems to me like you're a guy who you've earned a place in your career now where you're looking for that work-life balance, because it's that work-life balance that makes you a more interesting writer for the content that your clients are searching for.
Well, I'd like to think so. I mean, I'm also very conscious of the fact I'm 55. My old man retired when he was 53. And he was one of that generation, did the same job from the age of 18 onwards. They offered him an incredible package, and he looked at it and thought, well, I like my job, but hang on a second. And good for him that he did. Now, that sort of thing, unless you're a Mandarin in Whitehall, doesn't exist anymore. And the portfolio career is a far more common experience. And in some ways, yes, it does. It does fire me out of bed in the morning if I'm doing something completely different to what I was doing yesterday. And you've just described it very nicely. Lifelong learning, doing new things, bringing new, like I say, almost annexing new territories to bring within your comfort zone, and saying, yes, I can do that. I couldn't do that 12 months ago. I can do that now, and if you ask me to do it, I'll do it, and I'll do it well.
Fantastic. Martin, as we start to wrap up, I'd like to ask you a few quick-fire questions that our listeners are always interested in.
Okay.
What do you do to relax outside of the office?
Well, I don't know if it's relaxed, but I've got a season ticket behind the goal at Chelsea. Apart from that, I've got 2 teenage daughters who are, the love of my life, and I like to spend some time with them, even though they're teenage daughters, so the last thing they want to do is spend time with their old man.
Absolutely. Are there any books that you've recently read that you'd recommend to our listeners?
Fiction or non-fiction?
I'll let you choose.
Okay. The best book I have ever read, which I recommend left, right and centre, and like I said, I'd like to think I'm fairly good with the turn of phrase. I think of myself as a writer. I read The Road by Cormac McCarthy, and I am in awe. I am humbled. It's just the most astonishing piece of writing. It's a post-apocalyptic novel. It's a very simple construct, but just the most staggering piece of writing. So less formal than that, I'm a big fan of the Flashman books of George MacDonald Fraser. I like sporting autobiographies. Anything really.
That's fantastic, and that's going straight onto my to-read list, just the way you described that.
Love it.
Definitely. Are there any movies or TV shows that you've recently watched that you'd recommend to our listeners?
Recently watched, I'm afraid I'm old school in there. My favourite movie is in black and white, and that's High Noon.
Very good
and
movie.
People say, High Noon? But that's really old school. Yeah, it's a Western, but within the classic Greek unities of time, place, action. Zinnemann tells a story and shoots it beautifully. The cinematography, oh my goodness. He tells a story that's got every single human emotion, situation and challenge. And I'm sure that people will be saying, High Noon, are you sure? I love it. I absolutely love High Noon. TV programmes, pretty much anything with sport in it, but if you want my idea of the best comedy programme ever, it's Blackadder, because of the quality of the writing. I love a good box set. We could talk about The Wire, The Sopranos, Breaking Bad, but the number one for a desert island is The West Wing. And again, because of the quality of the writing. Yeah, it's a great ensemble cast, but the writing, just brilliant.
Absolutely great tips there and great recommendations there, Martin. I'm definitely behind you on those. Finally, where can people find out more about you and your business?
My website is www.leboomedia.com. You can also find me on the Kingston Chamber of Commerce website. I'm fairly easy to track down on LinkedIn, on Twitter, if you can get through all the stuff about Chelsea, and Facebook, places like that. But really, I'd like to think I'm fairly easy to find for obvious reasons.
Okay, and for the benefit of our listeners, I'll make sure I link all of those resources onto the show notes.
Thank you.
Martin, thank you for joining us on the Inside Kingston podcast. It's been a pleasure getting to know your story.
It's been great being here, Amir. Thank you very much.
That wraps up another episode of the Inside Kingston podcast. Make sure to check out our guests' website, pay them a visit, and help spread the word about what they're doing. If you have any questions or know someone who should be a guest on the show, please feel free to get in touch. I would also love it if you could go to iTunes and leave us a review and a 5-star rating. We work hard to bring on some great guests, and getting a review from you is one way to help the podcast rate well on iTunes so that others can find and enjoy the show too. Thanks for listening.